Walk into any supermarket today, and I want you to do something you've probably never done before. Find two products that are almost identical. Maybe it's two bottles of water, maybe it's two bars of chocolate. One costs $2.99. The other costs $3. Now stop for a second and ask yourself a question that almost nobody ever asks. If the company wanted $3, why didn't they simply charge $3? Why give away an entire cent on every single sale? It sounds ridiculous. 1 cent can't possibly change your life, and it certainly won't make a billion-dollar company rich. So why has this tiny pricing trick survived for decades and spread across almost every supermarket, restaurant, clothing store, and online marketplace in the world? Because that extra cent was never the point. The real product isn't the discount. The real product is your perception. Long before you reached for that item, before you compared it to anything else, before you convinced yourself it was a good deal, your brain had already started making a decision so fast and so automatic that you never even realized it happened. You looked at a number, believed it was your own judgment, and moved on. But what if it wasn't entirely your judgment? What if that simple price tag was carefully designed to guide your thinking without you ever noticing? Every single day, millions of people leave stores feeling satisfied because they believe they made smart financial decisions. They proudly tell themselves they found the better deal, saved money, or bought the product with the best value. But here's the uncomfortable question. What if the deal wasn't designed to save you money at all? What if it was designed to make spending feel easier? Imagine Atlas. It's Friday evening after a long week of work. He decides it's finally time to replace his old headphones. Nothing luxurious, just something reliable enough for music, work, and the occasional movie. He walks into an electronics store, heads toward the display, and immediately notices 3 options sitting side by side. The first pair costs $49.99. The second costs $99.99. The third costs $249.99. Atlas barely spends a few seconds looking at them before his attention settles on the middle option. $99 seems fair, he tells himself. The cheapest pair feels risky. Maybe the sound quality isn't great. The most expensive pair feels excessive. He isn't an audiophile. He doesn't need studio quality headphones. The middle one feels perfect. A few minutes later, Atlas leaves the store completely satisfied. He genuinely believes he made the smartest choice. He avoided buying something cheap. He avoided wasting money on something luxurious. He found the perfect balance, or at least that's what he believes. Because the question Atlas never asks is the one that changes everything. Why were those 3 prices there in the first place? Was the expensive pair actually expected to sell, or was it placed there for a completely different reason? Businesses discovered something fascinating many decades ago. People almost never decide whether a price is high or low by looking at the number itself. Instead, they compare it with whatever sits beside it. Remove the $249 headphones, and suddenly $99 feels expensive. Put the expensive pair back on the shelf, and the exact same $99 headphones suddenly feel like a bargain. Nothing about the product changed. The sound quality didn't change. The technology didn't change. Only the comparison changed. Yet somehow, Atlas's decision changed too. This is where pricing stops being mathematics and starts becoming psychology. Most people grow up believing prices simply reflect value. Businesses understand something much more powerful. Prices don't just reflect value, they create it. Imagine placing 2 identical black t-shirts on a table. Same fabric, same stitching, same quality, no logo, no branding. The only difference is the price tag. One says $20, the other says $200. Which one feels better? Most people instinctively point toward the expensive one, not because they've tested the material, not because they've compared the craftsmanship, simply because the higher price creates the expectation of higher quality. When information is limited, the human brain fills in the blanks. Expensive becomes premium, cheap becomes average. It's a shortcut, and businesses know exactly how powerful that shortcut is. That's why luxury brands rarely compete to become cheaper. Sometimes they raise prices and sell even more because the price itself becomes part of the product. You're no longer paying only for leather, steel, fabric, or technology. You're paying for confidence, status, exclusivity, identity. The number attached to the product quietly changes how people feel about owning it. But perhaps the most famous pricing strategy in history isn't found inside luxury boutiques. It's hiding in plain sight. Look around the next time you enter a supermarket. $9.99, $19.99, $99.99. You've seen these numbers thousands of times, so often that they've become invisible. But here's what's fascinating. Your brain doesn't read $9.99 the way a calculator does. It doesn't immediately think, that's basically $10. Instead, your brain pays the most attention to the very first number it sees, 9. That tiny difference changes your perception just enough to increase the likelihood of a purchase. One single cent has quietly generated billions of dollars in additional sales across the world. Not because 1 cent matters financially, but because the human brain doesn't always measure value with logic. It measures value with perception. And that's only the beginning, because the number on a price tag is only one small piece of a much larger system. Behind every supermarket shelf, every restaurant menu, every online store, every subscription plan, every luxury brand, every discount, every flash sale, every limited time offer, every buy one, get one free sign, and every free shipping promise, there is an invisible science working in the background. A science built around one question: how do human beings decide what something is worth? The answer to that question has become one of the most valuable pieces of knowledge in modern business. Companies spend billions of dollars every year studying it. They hire behavioral psychologists, economists, neuroscientists, data scientists, marketers, and product designers, not because changing one price tag seems important, but because even the smallest improvement in customer decisions can generate millions of dollars in additional profit. The companies that understand pricing best don't simply sell more products, they shape the way customers think. And once you begin to see the hidden psychology behind every price tag, something remarkable happens. You stop looking at prices as numbers. You start seeing them for what they really are. One of the most carefully engineered business tools ever created. And we've only scratched the surface, because what you've seen so far is just the beginning of a much bigger story. In the next part, you'll discover why expensive products often feel better, why restaurants secretly want you to ignore the cheapest meal on the menu, and why one simple pricing trick can completely change the decision you think you're making. The moment Atlas walked out of that electronics store, he believed the decision was over. He had compared the prices, weighed the options, and chosen the one that made the most sense. But what if the most important decision had already been made before he even entered the store? Because businesses learned something extraordinary a long time ago. They discovered that if they could change what people compared a product to, they could change what that product felt like without ever changing the product itself. And once you understand that idea, you'll begin noticing it everywhere. A few days later, Atlas walks into a cafe. He glances at the menu and notices 3 cup sizes. A small coffee costs $4, a medium costs $6.50, and a large costs $7. Almost without thinking, he orders the large. After all, paying 50 cents more for a much bigger drink feels like an obvious choice. He even smiles to himself, convinced he just got more value for his money. But here's the strange part. The cafe never needed the small coffee to sell well. Its purpose was something else entirely. It existed to make the large coffee feel like the smartest decision in the room. Atlas didn't choose the large because it was objectively the best value. He chose it because everything around it quietly pushed his brain in that direction. This is one of the biggest secrets in business. Companies don't always compete by making their products better. Sometimes they compete by changing the comparison. A $500 phone sounds expensive until it's placed beside a $1,200 phone. Suddenly, the same $500 begins to feel reasonable. A $60 steak feels outrageous until the menu also offers a $180 Wagyu steak. The cheaper option didn't become cheaper. Your perception simply shifted. Businesses know that value doesn't exist in isolation. It exists in comparison. Now think about luxury brands. Imagine walking into a store where every handbag costs $8,000. Most people immediately assume those bags must be exceptional. But ask yourself something interesting. Did the price convince you that the quality was high? Or did the quality convince you that the price was high? The answer isn't always obvious. Sometimes the price comes first, and your brain builds the story afterward. Expensive becomes exclusive. Exclusive becomes desirable. Desirable becomes valuable. That's why some of the world's most successful brands rarely compete compete on price. They compete on perception. Lowering the price might actually make people want the product less because the price itself has become part of the experience. Apple understood this lesson better than almost anyone. Year after year, critics ask the same question. Why are people willing to pay significantly more for products that often perform similarly to cheaper alternatives? The answer isn't found inside the processor or the camera. It's found inside the customer's mind. Apple doesn't just sell hardware. It sells confidence, simplicity, reliability, and identity. The higher price reinforces that image. Customers don't simply buy an iPhone. They buy the feeling that they're making a premium choice. In many cases, the price doesn't justify the experience. The experience is strengthened by the price. This pattern repeats itself everywhere. Walk into a supermarket and you'll notice products labeled family size, best value, or limited offer. These labels aren't just providing information, they're guiding attention. They tell your brain where to look before you've had time to think for yourself. Even the order in which products appear matters. Businesses understand that the first price you see becomes a reference point for every price that follows. That's why expensive products are often displayed first. Not because they expect everyone to buy them, but because they quietly redefine what every other price feels like. Online shopping has made this even more powerful. Imagine searching for a laptop. The first model costs $2,500. The second costs $1,600. The third costs $1,200. Most people never stop to ask why those products appear in that order. They simply begin comparing. By the time they reach the third laptop, it feels surprisingly affordable. The product didn't change while they were scrolling. Their expectations did. Every recommendation